Hi again, everyone. Because we missed a couple of nights, we're going to keep going with Chapter 7 tonight of The Bobbsey Twins at School by Laura Lee Hope. And like I said, we are about to start. Kaylee is still holding on with us tonight, so let's see what happens during the big fire. Kaylee's waving from the side. Little finger wave. There we go. You ready? Okay. Chapter 7, The Big Fire. "Our boathouse is on fire," cried Bert. "Oh, my canoe will burn up." "And our lovely sailboat," exclaimed Nan. "Oh, Daddy, this is horrible." "It is horrible," her father agreed grimly. "I'd rather lose both those boats than the motorboat." He was already dashing back into his room to dress. "Please, take me. I'm a fireman," said Freddie, pattering after his father in his bare feet. "Not this time," Mr. Bobbsey replied. Then, seeing the disappointment in his small son's eyes, he added, "If Mother wants to bring you, well, all right." Another engine dashed by the Bobbsey house, and the sound of the siren increased. The voices and footsteps of many persons as they rushed onto the blaze could also be heard, and there resounded the cry, "Fire! Fire! The lake's on fire!" "What do they mean?" asked Flossie fearfully. Her mother guessed that more than one boathouse must be on fire. Perhaps dry grass was burning. She hoped that the fire would not spread to the nearby lumberyard. Bert was dressing quickly in his room. He hoped his father would let him go to the lake. At any rate, he intended to be ready when he made his request so as not to cause delay. By this time, Mr. Bobbsey had dressed and had started downstairs. Bert raced after him. "May I come, Dad?" he asked. Mr. Bobbsey hesitated a moment, then said with a smile, "Well, I suppose so, since you are dressed." When they reached the street, they could tell that the fire was mounting higher. The wind was blowing hard, sending sparks in every direction. There were many buildings down by the lake, and if the fire should get out of control, there was no telling what might happen. The Bobbseys' boathouse was a large one, having recently been made bigger, as Mr. Bobbsey was thinking of buying a new boat to use in his business. As he and his son reached the waterfront, both of them gasped. Not only was their boathouse on fire, but also those on either side of it, as well as a dock running out into the lake. The firemen were working furiously, hacking through windows and spraying chemicals on gas tanks to keep them from exploding. Huge streams of water were spurting everywhere, not only to drown the flames, but to keep other buildings from catching on fire. Every few moments there would be a great hissing sound, and more white smoke would billow out. Only one side of the Bobbsey boathouse was ablaze as yet. "Oh, I hope they'll save it," cried Bert. "You wait here," said his father, rushing forward. "Where are you going?" Bert wanted to know. "I'm going to see if I can save any of our boats." When the firemen recognized him, they let Mr. Bobbsey through the lines. They were a little worried about his trying to move the boats. At this moment, two of the men who worked at his lumberyard stepped up. "We'll help," they called out. "Good," said Mr. Bobbsey. They rushed around to the front and climbed into the motorboat. Mr. Bobbsey had brought the key. He quickly started the engine. One of his helpers grabbed the gunwale of the sailboat, and the other man grasped the side of Bert's canoe. Together the three boats pulled out onto the lake, safe from the fire. "Hooray! Hooray!" shouted Bert. The rescue of the boats was just in time. The blazing wall toppled inside. A few minutes later, the roof fell in. There was no chance to save the rowboat or anything else in the building, but this loss was small compared to the other boats. A third engine was working now, and so much water was pumped that no fire could have withstood it for very long. In fact, the three buildings would suffer as much water damage as burned wood. Mr. Bobbsey moored the boats at the lumberyard and then returned to the fire. By this time, the blaze was practically out. One engine continued to throw water on the smoldering sparks. The crowd began to leave now, for there was nothing more to see, and it was chilly. "My!" exclaimed Bert as father came to where he had left his son. "It didn't take you long to rescue the boats. That was swell." His father smiled. "I couldn't have done it if the firemen hadn't assured me the place would be safe for a few more minutes. We have a good fire department. This whole lakeside might have burned." "Flossie and Freddie and Nan are over there with Mother," said Bert. They walked to where the four were standing. Freddie was telling a fireman who he was and that he wanted to be a fireman when he grew up. "I wish I could squirt some water right now," begged Freddie. "What's that? You want to be a fireman?" asked the man in the rubber coat and big helmet. "Yes, I do," said Freddie. "Then come with me and I'll let you help hold the hose," said the fireman. I'll look after him, he went on to Mr. Bobbsey, and to Mrs. Bobbsey, and she nodded to show that Freddie could go. What a good time the little fellow had, standing beside a real fireman and helping throw real water on a real fire. Freddie never forgot that. Of course, it was only one of the small hose lines that he held, but Freddie was very happy just the same. The fire chief came up to Mr. Bobbsey, who expressed his thanks for the quick work of the firemen in helping him save the boats. Have you any idea what started the fire, Mr. Bobbsey? Asked the chief. Was the boathouse in use? Not tonight, the twins' father replied. Did the fire start here? We suspect it did. He held out a partly filled package of cigarettes. These were lying alongside your boathouse, he said, and near the wall inside were 2 half-smoked cigarettes of the same brand. You found some of these cigarettes in the boathouse? Asked Mr. Bobbsey, astounded. No one I know smokes that kind. They're mosswoods. The question is, who was smoking? Went on the chief. In my opinion, a cigarette throws aside, or perhaps a lighted match dropped in some corner started this fire. The Bobbseys looked at one another in bewilderment. Who had broken into their boathouse? That was chapter 7. Good night.